Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to learn something about the for loop. So for loop is nothing but it is a loop which is actually used to repeat a set of code a number of times. So in this tutorial what we are going to learn is that we are going to learn how the for loop can be used to actually print out numbers from 1 to 10. Also we are going to learn how a for loop can be used to print out the elements inside a list, and also we are going to write in a code which will allow us to print out the even numbers from the range of 1 to 20. So the very first thing which we need to understand is what is the syntax of a for loop. So now let's go ahead and write in the syntax for the for loop. So for loop you simply type in for, and then after for you actually need to have a variable. So let's take the variable as x. Then after the variable name you need to type in, and now depending upon the thing which you want to perform you need to print out something in front of n. So in this case, as we want to print out a list of numbers from 1 to 10, what we are going to do here is that we are going to take range over here. And to this range, as you all know that in order to have numbers from 1 to 10 we need to specify the starting number as 1, give a comma and specify the ending number as 11, because if you specify 11 here that means it is going to go from 1 to 11. And right after this just give a colon, and the line of code which you want to repeat should be written inside over here. Now let me explain you what exactly happens in a for loop. Now this variable x is actually going to take the value from 1 to 10 throughout this loop. So every loop has an iteration, and iteration is nothing but when the loop executes for the very first time it is called as the first iteration of the loop. When the loop executes for the second time it is called as the second iteration. So what exactly happens here is that when this loop is going to execute for the very first time, the value of 1 is going to get stored in x. So when the code written inside the loop gets executed, it is again going to come back here, and now for the next iteration the value which is stored in x is going to be 2, and so on and so forth. So the value which is stored in x is going to change from 1 to 10 throughout the loop execution. So now we know that the value of x is going to change throughout the loop, and we exactly want to do the same. We actually want to print out the numbers from 1 to 10. So what we do here inside the loop is that we type in print x. So what this is going to do is that it is going to take the value of x and it is going to print it out as long as this loop continues to execute. So now let's go ahead and save the code and see how this thing works. So as you could see, now we have a list of numbers from 1 to 10. So this is possible only because of the for loop. Now what if you actually have printed out something else? So for example, let's say you don't want to repeat this line of code. Instead, let's say you want to display your name. So I'm going to simply type in print, and I'm going to type in my name here. And let's say this is the line of code which I want to repeat or I want to execute a number of times. So let's say I want to print out my name 5 times. So what I'm going to do here is that instead of having this thing in the range of 1 to 11, I'm going to change this thing to 6. That means my name is going to be repeated 5 times. So now if I save the code and if I run this thing, as you could see, my name is printed out 5 times. So whenever you want to execute a certain line of code multiple number of times, in that case you could go ahead and use the for loop. So for loop is basically used to execute a bunch of code number of times or as many number of times as you want. Now the same for loop can also be used to actually print out the elements of a list. So in order to learn that, let's go ahead and create a list of fruits. So I'm going to type in fruits equals, and let's add some fruits here. So this is going to be apple. The next one is going to be, let's say, banana. Let's say the third one is peach, and let's say the final one is orange. So once we have this list, what we need to actually do is that we need to access each and every element of this list and we need to print it out. So again, we go down below here, type in for. Again, you could take a variable x, or you could also name this variable as anything. So we type for x in, and this time instead of having a range over here, what we are going to do is that we are going to specify the name of the list. So the name of the list in this case is fruits. So I'm going to type in for x in fruits, give a colon, and what this is going to do is that every time this loop executes, it is going to take one fruit from here, which is the first fruit, that is apple, and it is going to store apple into x. And in the next iteration, it is going to take banana, it is going to store it into x. Then it is going to move on to a new fruit. It is going to take peach, store it into x, and finally take orange and store it into x. So what our motive is to basically print out these fruits. So as each and every fruit is going to be placed in x each and every time the loop executes, so I'm going to type in print x. So this is essentially going to print out every single fruit each and every time this loop executes. So if you save the code now and if you run this thing, as you could see, now we have the number of fruits printed right over here. So that is basically how a for loop works. The basic syntax for writing for loop is you type in for, then you type in x, which is a variable, then you type in, and then either you could specify a range or you could specify a list like this. So if you actually want to traverse a list, then you could specify the name of your list here, or if you want to repeat a set of code number of times, then you could go ahead and specify the range over here, which will essentially take care of the number of times your loop is going to execute. So now let's go ahead and write in a simple program to print out even numbers from 1 to 20. So the code for this is going to be the same. Again, we are going to use for loop. So we type for x in, then use a range, and in the range you could specify numbers from 1 to 21 as we want numbers from 1 to 20. So once we are done with this, the next thing which we do is that as we want only the even numbers from 1 to 20, what we are going to do here is that we are going to change this thing to 2. So what this is going to do is that it is going to take 1 and it is going to add 2 to it. But I guess this range should be from 0 to 21 rather than just 1 to 21, because we are specifying a third parameter, which is the interval, as 2. So what this is going to do is that instead of counting by one interval, it is going to count by 2 intervals so that we could actually get the even numbers. So give a semicolon here and simply print out the value of x. So if you save the code and if you run this, as you could see, you have a list of all the even numbers from 0 to 20. So by using for loop, you could pretty much do anything that is related to repetition. So if you want to repeat a set of code, you could use for loops. If you want to traverse a list, even then you could use for loops. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys understood the significance of for loop, how a for loop can be used to repeat a set of code a number of times, and how to use for loop to traverse through a list. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.